software permission? You know what I mean?
Yes, you should have permission.
Okay.
Do you not? If you don't, please let me know. Well, thank you all for joining us. We will get going here right now. So we'll start. I'm seeing the raise hand. If the raise hand feature isn't available, feel free to put your name in the chat and we will call on you. We will start it off with Senator J.D. Ford.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to discuss the myths and facts affecting working class Hoosiers. You know, there's been a lot said these past couple of weeks, and we wanted to provide a different perspective. The data is not lying. Indiana is experiencing a worker shortage. The underlying causes have been well understood by economists for a long time. Hoosiers are not returning to their jobs because wages are simply too low. Think about it. Let's not forget that we are currently in the middle of a pandemic and conditions are not optimal for a $7.25 job. Too often, we focus on creating the job opportunity and too little on the life outcome. COVID and the ensuing workforce shortage have exposed a decades-long problem so many of us knew. The public narrative has misled workers into believing that they should take the jobs provided to them instead of taking the jobs to help their careers advance and flourish so their families can succeed. Indiana ranks 46 in the nation on wage growth since 2000. This is a recurring trend. We saw it with our teachers, and we're seeing it with our general workforce. Democrats understand if Indiana truly wants to put the pandemic in the rearview mirror, this is an opportunity to provide Hoosier workers a ticket to a better future for their families. Policies enacted by my colleagues on the other side simply are not working. We want to work across the aisle to address the workforce shortage. We could have done that this past session, but so far that hasn't been possible. Next, I'll pass the mic over to Senator Yoder. Senator Yoder.
Thank you, Senator Ford. Today, we're calling on two major actions to be put into place in Indiana to get Indiana back on track. We need to raise the minimum wage, and we need the U.S. Congress to pass the American Jobs Plan. Indiana doesn't just need jobs, we need good paying jobs. Indiana has placed itself in a race to the bottom with other states to see who can undercut wages, who can cut benefits and corporate taxes the most. And that's not a jobs plan. That's a profit for a few plan. And a lot of Hoosiers have been working too hard for too long just to scrape by. That failure rests on elected leaders. Some Hoosiers are being forced to decide between paying their utility bills or feeding their families. That's a state that only works for the rich. We're here today to advocate for a state that works for working people. Hoosiers need living wages so that folks can afford to live their everyday lives. And Indiana needs the American Jobs Plan. which would not only create jobs, but good paying jobs. The American Jobs Plan will empower union workers and revitalize Indiana's infrastructure. And in the process, will create jobs, rebuilding Indiana's roads and bridges, expanding broadband internet access across Indiana, eliminating childcare deserts in the state, and making healthcare more accessible for Indiana's veterans. The workforce shortage in Indiana is the result of compounding problems that have left Hoosiers high and dry for far too many years. Indiana needs a direction, an economic plan that starts from the bottom up and the middle out. That's what raising the minimum wage will do, and that's what the American Jobs Plan will do. And now I'll pass it over to Senator Melton.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. I want to briefly talk a little bit more about the minimum wage and just give a little bit more facts that my colleagues have already shared. About 30% of Indiana's entire workforce earns below $15 an hour. That's about 892,000 Hoosiers, 454,000 women, 74,000 Black Hoosiers, and 133,000 seniors. Now, this past session, I proposed Senate Bill 334. This bill would have incrementally raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, a living wage. And please keep in mind, Indiana is still at $7.25 at a minimum wage. For context, a $15 minimum wage is just $31,200 per year. Now, my favorite part of the legislation in Senate Bill 334 would have removed the restrictions that prevent local municipalities from raising the minimum wage. That local restriction is local control and small government at its best. But the result, my legislation didn't receive a hearing. Senate Republicans simply refused to hold a hearing on a bill that would have brought better opportunities to more than 890,000 Hoosiers, raising them up to that $15 an hour. Now, my Republican colleagues appear to have no desire to work in a bipartisan way to address this issue. To myself and our caucus, this solution is a win-win opportunity for Hoosiers across the entire state of Indiana. But the General Assembly has failed to act on that. Senate Democrats are following the data. Raising the minimum wage will improve our economy, create better life outcomes for the working class Hoosiers across this entire state. Everyday people recognize that low wages are a problem. That's why the majority of Americans support raising the minimum wage to a living wage. 64% of Americans support raising the minimum wage, and 57% of small business owners said raising the minimum wage will not impact their business at all. These ideas and policies to us are common sense. It's becoming a fundamental error for state leaders not to act on this growing problem. So now at this time, I want to turn it over to our Senate leader, Greg Taylor, to bring us home on this issue.
Thank you, Senator Melton, and thank you all for being here today. My colleagues have hinted at this, but I'm just going to say it. The Indiana Republican Party's partisanship is setting Hoosier workers back, and they are setting Indiana back from reaching its full potential. For the last 20 years, Indiana has been attracting low-wage jobs, but the jobs are being described as minimum expectations by our governor. In fact, Holcomb and the Indiana Republican Party continue to use the myth that the minimum wage have been debunked by economists and facts. All of their partisan politics have become too extreme for Indiana. I'm talking about Republicans who claim that the small businesses are afraid of an increase in a minimum wage when the facts prove otherwise. I'm also talking about Republicans claiming that the state will lose jobs when the facts prove workers have to have 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs just to earn a living. The Republican Party is not going to be respectful of the hardworking Hoosiers we know across our state who are paid wages that are far below what their work deserves. We need to be ensuring that folks can afford to live in their homes or their apartments, pay for childcare, and afford basic living expenses. That's why we are calling on a raise to the minimum wage in Indiana and then for Congress to approve the American Jobs Plan. We can raise the standard of living in Indiana and create good paying jobs. We'd like to now open the floor up to questions from those of you who are attending today. Please use the raise your hand function if you have any questions, and we'll call on you. And please, at the beginning of your question, mention who you are directing your question towards, and we'll open it up for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, everybody. We will, if the raise hand function isn't working for y'all, please send a note in the chat with your question, with who you are and who you'd like to direct your question towards. We'll start with David Williams. David, can you first start with who you're directing your question towards? Thanks.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. I've got two questions. One for either Senator Greg Taylor or Senator Melton. What's the specific number that you're calling on the state to raise the minimum wage? And is it $15 an hour, and are you calling it to be immediate or incremental?
Yes, I can speak to that. Senate Bill 334 would have raised the minimum wage ultimately to $15 an hour, but it would have been done in an incremental way. It would have raised it immediately to $10 an hour. Then a year after that, $1 an hour per year, going up to $15 an hour. So, and data just shows us that is a livable wage that helps to address all of the issues that my colleagues mentioned in terms of paying for the basic human needs.
So is that what you're calling on now, that incremental step up to $15 an hour?
Absolutely. We can't wait on Congress. I know a lot of my colleagues use that narrative to say if the federal government raises it, then Indiana will follow suit because it will have to. But many states surrounding us, Illinois, Michigan, and other Midwestern states are raising their minimum wage, if not to $11 an hour, then close to $15 an hour. So if we're having a worker shortage and we're going to lose more population of folks going to those neighboring states that may be on the borders.
David, I would agree with my colleague. It was incremental, and that was done, I think, creatively by Senator Melton and his legislation. And one of the things that I've learned from being a member of this General Assembly is that, for example, this session, we taxed the unemployment benefits of hardworking Hoosiers who, by no fault of their own, were actually laid off during the pandemic. Yet we did not tax the PPP loans that were received by companies in Indiana and then forgiven by the federal government. I mean, we can't continue down that path of taking the benefits that are provided for hardworking Hoosiers who want to live and raise their families in Indiana, but are being taxed by the government, by the state, when the companies that are providing the jobs, these low-paying jobs, they don't get taxed on the benefits that they received under the same plan. That just shows the difference on how the Democrats in the Senate, as well as in the House, I believe, look at what we need to do and who we need to look after. And then for us, it's about the people. For them, it's about the businesses, the corporations that that benefited from forgiven. Remember, PPP loans that were forgiven have not been taxed by the state of Indiana.
Thank you. And Senator Taylor, I have one more quick question on a different subject. This is the week anniversary of the death of George Floyd. I know Indiana has passed several laws about protesting, and several other states have as well. SB 471 would put new penalties for protests that happen near critical infrastructure, and that was signed into law. How do you feel about that bill that has now become law, and what it means for protesters in Indiana today in the future?
David, let me first say this is a day for me that's like September 11th because I actually got to view a man's life being taken away by a law enforcement officer who was there, who was supposed to be there to protect and serve. And we cannot allow this situation to go censored. We cannot allow us to sweep under the rug some of the things that we need to do to make sure that law enforcement has a respect for the community, that we should all have a respect for law enforcement. And today is a day that a lot of us who worked on House Bill 1006 feel like is a small step in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. And I want to make sure that we continue to fight to make sure law enforcement is respected, but also that people who deal with law enforcement don't lose their lives like we saw today 1 year ago in that very tragic George Floyd situation.
And for either you or Senator Melton, how do you feel about SB 471, that particular protest penalty law?
No, you go ahead, Senator Melton.
Well, I think it shouldn't have been a priority of this legislature. I think Senator Taylor hit on it the best. Our caucus, along with the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus, spent an entire year working on legislation, talking to law enforcement officers across the entire state of Indiana, working with grassroots organizations, Black Lives Matter, to faith-based organizations, to craft policies that Hoosiers wanted to hold police accountable, and also to make sure that Hoosiers remain safe with de-escalation training, with ensuring that there's, we ban the usage of the chokehold. That's where the priority should have remained and stayed, instead of passing policies that essentially says, if people that are protesting, and we've seen it in the state of Indiana, have peacefully protested, increasing those penalties, to me, was not a just move. We did not support that decision being made as a collective, many of us. And it speaks to the priorities of the General Assembly. However, we are extremely excited and pleased with the passage of House Bill 1006.
Thank you.
We will next go to Justin Hicks.
Hey, you guys, Justin Hicks from Indiana Public Broadcasting. 3 quick questions. First one towards Senator Ford. I know at the beginning you kind of said, we now know that this is indeed a labor shortage. I know I've talked to economists who have said, for them, the biggest indicator of a labor shortage is when you see wages starting to rise. I'm just kind of curious, what evidence do you see that makes you think that like there is indeed a labor shortage?
Yeah, Justin, thank you for that question. I want to also simply say that, I want to applaud the businesses who have already taken upon themselves to raise their wages, to provide their workers a living wage. I think, sometimes we often forget to give them the kudos that they deserve. But yeah, I mean, and to your point, some of the economists are saying, yeah, perhaps, going back to the work search requirements as well, kind of forcing folks to get back out there into the workforce. But some of those economists are even saying that, that some of those workforce requirements should be paused and give folks a break. And so, so the data to me is very clear. And I think the way that we get people out working again is by raising the minimum wage. I mean, just think about it. For you and your family, are you going to take a job that is going to pay you $7.25, $8, $9 when we know we're still in the middle of a pandemic, when we know that you might have health conditions that would put your family in jeopardy? But if we raised the minimum wage, if we provided a living wage to folks, then you could potentially make that call yourself, and that would be a decision that you and your family have to make, but not for a $725 job. I just don't think that is what everyday workers in our state want to do.
Thank you so much. And that's a great segue to my next question, which is kind of open for anyone, really. I don't know who wants to field this, but everyone I've talked to, or a lot of unemployed workers I've talked to, have said childcare is a really big issue for them right now. We've seen some data that says a lot of childcare facilities have closed or have not yet reopened at full capacity. Some capacity, maybe not full capacity. And the ones that have raised rates slightly. So what can we do about that? What would you like to see the state of Indiana do to address childcare as a workforce issue?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to tackle that. Here's the real situation. How can you expect an individual to go to a job that pays $7.25 an hour and still raise a family? Part of raising a family is having adequate childcare services so that non-school age children, and don't forget, even school-age children starting this summer are going to need to have some safe place to be looked after, or to safe place to learn. And we're asking Hoosiers to take these, what the governor calls minimum expectation jobs, and not have access to childcare. And when they get access to childcare, they can't afford it because the rates have gone up. I got an economics degree. I earned an economics degree from Indiana University. And when demand goes up and your supply goes down, the price goes up naturally. So you're going to continue to see an increase in childcare costs for hardworking Hoosiers, especially this summer. And what can they do? The governor has decided he's going to take away that $300 a week benefit from the federal government, which essentially could pay for childcare for these people to go to work. So you got to make a choice. Do you go to work making $7.25 an hour? The governor is going to make sure that you don't get that $300 a week benefit that a lot of states across the country their residents are getting and going to continue to get. And we are going to force them to go to a $7.25 an hour job. And to me, from an economic standpoint, that just does not make any sense, Justice. And we can do better. We can do a lot better. We can provide CCDF and other benefits to families who are working to help defray some of the costs of childcare. And with the increased costs, I don't know what's going to happen this summer. I think Senator Yoder was going to chime in.
Thanks, Senator Taylor. Justin, I actually filed a bill for childcare tax credits this session, and it was supported by the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. However, it did not get a hearing at all. And in my remarks earlier, I said that we need to build from the bottom up and the middle out. So many families. I have 3 children. I did have a job that made decent wages, but the problem is we have it takes the entire paycheck to pay for childcare. And so when you're making, let's say, $35,000, $40,000 a year, and you have to weigh sending your children to childcare, which I know that many of our teachers are faced with this, what they do is they decide it's just not worth it for our family. I'm going to leave the profession. And so we need to address that piece of this. If we're going to make Indiana stronger, we do need to build the middle out. And so many of our wages do not cover the expensive cost of childcare. And my bill would allow more people to access childcare tax credits that would put Indiana, at least to be competitive in the Midwest. And we certainly can do better, but the cost of childcare is certainly, it is holding Indiana back. And we need to do something so working families stand a shot at just being able to provide for their families, pay for everyday necessities, and stand a shot at a future together. Childcare is such a stressor on families, and Indiana could lead the way if we showed some courage by elected leaders to do something to address this problem.
Can I also chime in? And both of my colleagues did a phenomenal job. I also want to emphasize the significance and the importance of passing the American Jobs Plan. We know that 55% of all Hoosiers live in a childcare desert, and that deficit is creating a significant problem for our workforce. So through the American Jobs Plan, helping to reinvest in our schools and our facilities, also to provide childcare, to renovate and make these locations more accessible. And accessibility is also an issue that we have to talk about, along with transportation for many families as well. So I just wanted to add that along with my colleagues.
I mean, it's such a major decision for a family. Where do I put the most important thing in my life, the most important existence, my children? Where do I place them so that I can continue to earn money to put food on the table? And I've lived this. And so many decide to, there's like a babysitter comes into the house, or there's somebody who's doing it out of their home, and it seems like it's more accessible, just to speak to Senator Melton's point. But there then are no regulations, no protections for those children or for those families. So the childcare desert problem needs to be addressed, and we need to do a better job. We say we value our children. Well, then let's put that value into place and provide some protections for Indiana children. And addressing the childcare deserts problem would be a step forward.
Thank you so much, senators. Final question here. This is it's a hard left turn, but Senator Taylor, I was going to ask this of you. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. I know Holcomb is heading to Israel today and tomorrow. What are your thoughts? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Is this the right time to go, given everything that's happening over there, or what do you think about that?
I don't take personal jabs at the governor, because I wouldn't want him to take personal jabs at me. But the optics of him going, if he's going to go over there to negotiate something along the lines of a ceasefire with Netanyahu, I think it's poor timing. I guess it was a pre-scheduled trip. It's not just the governor, by the way. There's some businesses going over there too. Check the list. The interesting part about this is it's supposed to be for, foreign relations and our companies that are here in the state of Indiana that are represented. I just feel like it's a bad time. But it's his choice to go. I'm focused, like I said, And I want to emphasize that I want to work with the governor and trying to push forward some policies that benefit working Hoosiers. But it seems to me that he's first got to get past his own party. I mean, let's not sugarcoat the fact we've been back in session to override his veto, and that was the third time we did it in one session. I mean, I've been in the legislature for 12 years, and I could probably count on one hand how many times we've done it the entire career. But we've done it 3 times in this session. So the governor, to me, he might be taking a break from his own party, kind of kicking him around from the legislative session and going forward. I mean, it's going to be a heck of a summer for him when he gets back.
Thanks so much for your time, everyone.
Great. We have David Williams back up, and he has a question for Senator Taylor.
Good morning again. One more quick question. Given that session is over, how do you guys plan to or hope to get this incremental increase to $15 an hour into practice and into place across Indiana? Or are you going to wait until 2022, next year, to get this done?
Well, let me kind of we did a weird thing this session. We recessed. We did not sine die, David, which means we're still in session. Now, you know, I don't believe that they're going to have the courage to come back and address this issue while we're in recess. Although we spent $40,000 of taxpayer money to come and override the governor's veto of a piece of legislation that, quite frankly, we could have waited until the next session to do during the regular time we were in session. So first, the session's not over. The leadership can call General Assembly back because we recessed at any time, and we could hear legislation associated with increasing the minimum wage in the state of Indiana. I want to make that very clear. It is, we can do it now without the governor calling us back. And to me, especially when, and I'm just predicting, but when the summer hits and these people have to make the decision as to, like Senator Yoder said, whether or not they send their child to daycare or some kind of responsible caretaker or go to a job, I think we're going to learn very quickly that we should have taken a better look at this.
Can I share just a quick thought on that as well? Senate Democrats, we took a lot of criticism year after year when we were fighting and advocating to raise teacher pay. Every year we will come, we will host our press conferences, we will talk about our plan, talk about our legislation, and we didn't stop. We didn't stop because we knew that was what the community wanted. We knew that was what teachers wanted. And look at what happened this session. We finally were able to address the teacher pay, which essentially will address teacher shortage. And I look at this as the same type of situation in regards to, we know that this is a decision that many Hoosiers want, over 800,000 Hoosiers need in terms of raising it to a livable wage. And we won't stop. And I think it's something that we need the public to chime in and reach out to their local legislators and talk about the importance of raising our minimum wage of $7.25 to a livable wage so we can address these issues such as transportation, such as childcare, and so much more.
Great. Next, we have Eric Berman with WIBC.
Hi, Senators. Good to see you all again. Several questions. I guess my first one is for Senator Melton, although anybody can jump in. Senator, you mentioned specifically the goal of $15 an hour that would be higher than any state currently offers. The highest of even our neighbors is $11 next door in Illinois. What makes that the right figure?
Well, I think data shows us that, and I use the term again, livable wage. It's not just setting a number. We're talking about an actual dollar amount that we know that's going to help provide those basic human needs that Hoosiers deserve, every single person deserves. So I think as you look at other states, they're not just stopping at the $11 an hour, they're phasing it in as well. So I look at it as an opportunity, and we can't be left behind. Right now, we're not even having the discussion or the conversation as a legislature to have it. And that's all that we're doing. We're trying to push the issue. We're trying to push this conversation forward so we can start debating it. Give the bill a hearing. Let's have a discussion. Allow Hoosiers to weigh in. Allow businesses to weigh in. But right now it's being stopped by the supermajority.
And on a similar note, and this is for anybody, and admittedly this is anecdotal data, but there have been several businesses, as we talk about a labor shortage, several businesses have come out and said, look, I'm offering not $7.25, I'm offering $11, $13 an hour, and I still can't get applications. Do you have information suggesting that they are the exception rather than the norm? And if not, how would the minimum wage increase improve the labor shortage situation?
Eric, that is anecdotal. And here's why. I used to, early on in my professional career, I worked for the state of Indiana Economic Development. And wages sometimes are bloated, if you will, with a whole bunch of things called benefits, right? So the businesses that I've seen are those businesses like restaurants, bars, combinations of both. They're service-oriented businesses, which is usually a combination of tips and then a basic wage, okay? So when you look at those businesses and they say, hey, we'll give you $11 and we'll pay you $11 an hour. Don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe, as we say. The bottom line is they're saying you're still going to get that basic tip, that basic wage of $4.25, and we're telling you you're going to make more than 11. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, what hours are you going to work? It's usually not going to be an 8-hour day. It's going to be 4 or 5. You've got the combination of childcare needs, along with the fact that there's no benefits. And so I don't like the dialogue when people are saying that small business owners are offering $11 an hour. But what's the difference between $11 an hour, no benefits, or $7.25 plus we'll pay your health care and we'll pay your, those are all other things that are in there. And these businesses know the answer to that. And what we're saying is a livable wage, regardless of the benefits. A livable wage, which is the dollar you make per hour. I don't know if there are restaurant or businesses out there that are offering $11 wage plus the benefits. Please tell them to go on their website, post it, and I'm sure people will come.
Let me give one more thing too as well. I think it's important to mention is if there's hesitation from our colleagues to raise the minimum wage, collect across the board as a state, I think another option is the second part to that legislation that will remove the restrictions from locals to make that decision. If a community feels as if they want to raise wages to attract a population or attract Hoosiers or new people to that part of the state, then allow them to make that decision at a local level. We shouldn't allow the state to preempt or prevent that from happening. If the economy there says that it's a good move and a good decision, then we should allow that to happen.
I have one more question, but I want to first compliment Senator Taylor on the Eddie Murphy reference. Senator Ford, I want to go off the board as others have. You're up for re-election next year. I've been hearing your name suggested for a potential statewide run. Do you plan to run for office next year, and which one?
Thank you, Eric. That's a great question. It's a question I'm getting a lot these days. At this point, I'm focused on serving Hoosiers of Senate District 29. Should other opportunities to serve Hoosiers in another way present itself, I'd consider it. But for right now, I'm focused on Senate District 29.
Great. If that's all the questions, that's everyone that's reached out to me. If anyone else has any questions, unmute quickly. We'll give you a second. But otherwise, we will close up shop. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. You all have my email. And thank you so much for being here. Bye.